Good day, viewers. You're welcome to my channel. And if today is your first day of coming across my channel, please subscribe. Thank you. Now, it's not going to be news that the US court ordered a Chinese firm to seize Nigerian assets. But what transpired between the Nigerian government, that is the Ogun State government of Nigeria, and the Chinese government is what we do not know. But from this video that I'm going to post now, you will get to understand the entire story of what transpired between the Nigerian government and the Chinese government. After watching this video, please subscribe and also drop your candid comment.
Listen to this next update. Let us look at that verdict by the US court that has thrown Aso Rock into confusion. Look at how the papers reported it. US court authorizes Chinese investors to seize Nigeria's assets. An appellate court in the United States authorized Zhongshan, a Chinese company, to proceed with its efforts to confiscate Nigeria's assets abroad after it rejected Nigeria's sovereign immunity argument. The decision on August 9, 2024 came after judges at the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia in Washington found that Nigeria had violated both the fundamental and commercial rights of the executives at a Chinese firm that had entered into a trade zone agreement with Nigeria. Daily Post reports that the latest development worsens a crisis that the Nigerian government has been attempting to manage in Europe and prevent from spilling to other jurisdictions. A French court had earlier authorized the seizure of 3 presidential jets due to the ongoing dispute between Zhongshan and the Ogun State government. However, Nigeria argued before the United States District Court for the District of Columbia in Washington that its sovereign immunity forbade the matter from being entertained in a U.S. court. But the federal judge denied Nigeria's argument, saying the country is a signatory to the New York Convention that allows arbitration between persons, which may include a sovereign entity. The court stated that Nigeria can be held liable for the breach against the Chinese since Ogun is a federation unit of Nigeria. The presidency on Thursday described as fraudulent the attempts by the Chinese company to take over offshore assets of the federal government of Nigeria. Ononuga stated that the federal government is not under any contractual obligation with the company, noting that the case in which Zhongshan tries to use every unorthodox means to strip the country's offshore asset is between the company and the Ogun State government.
Now we take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. The federal government yesterday reacted to the alleged seizure of 3 presidential planes in Paris, France, following a dispute between a private Chinese firm and the Ogun State government, saying those aircraft are sovereign assets and therefore immune from confiscation. Citing extant principles of international law, the government acknowledged that the actions of a subnational or local entity were attributable to the state or country itself. However, the Nigerian government said it had commenced both legal and diplomatic moves to recover the 3 aircraft in the presidential fleet. At the same time, Ogun State government faulted the judicial process that led to the provisional attachment of the aircraft and said it had begun steps to vacate the order. Labour Party presidential candidate in the 2023 poll, Peter Obi, described the reported seizure of 3 presidential jets as international embarrassment and demanded full explanation. The Chinese company Zhongshan Fengsheng Industrial Investment Company Limited was seeking to enforce a final award granted in its favor on March 26, 2021 against one of Nigeria's subnationals, Ogun State. All right, so it's Ogun State against the Chinese company, but of course, the federal government has been dragged into this. And now, unfortunately, 3 presidential jets are being held ransom. Ufa, your take on the story?
So at first, I received this with shock, and it's embarrassing, like Peter Obi says, because were the jets that we complained about them not buying, were they part of these jets?
It's believed so because one of the jets is the new one that's gotten for over $100 million.
So at first, you see how God reveals the secret of people when you try to hide things away. We complained that it's no good to buy those jets at this time. The Senate went ahead and said, don't worry, we'll give you the backing. I'm not sure if the supplementary budget has been passed, but the jet has been bought. All of a sudden, I remember when the Showore released the videos then of those jets. Now, finally, we have confirmed because the jet was arrested. Secondly, culture will eat strategy for breakfast. I've said that over 1 million times. For every time I've said that here, if you also count, I should be a billionaire by now. And that's what happens to Nigeria. So this is not the first time. I'll take you back to the 70s. Nigeria made a lot of money. Something happened called the cement armada. We wanted cement for development. But most of those cements were backed up in the ports. They couldn't clear them. Demurrage set in. And then we started to cancel some of the contracts we had with international partners. From the 70s, late 70s, Nigeria settled this judgment debt and court cases till the early 80s, 82, 83. In fact, there were many case laws by Lord Denning that had to do with Nigeria on the cement armada. Nigeria was a laughingstock internationally. A couple of years ago, we had P&ID. Today, we had this. What were the terms of contracts the Ogun State government agreed with them? How do we handle our contracts? Where are the other cases? And I think my very good friend and brother, Lateef Fagbemi, should please help us check through the other pending cases like this to save us all this national embarrassment. We can say, oh, they have no right. Yes, we have a right of appeal against the Chinese, but it will not stop us from the embarrassment already. The embarrassment has already happened. It's already another black spot. So I'd like to charge the Attorney General of the Federation to help us check through so we even know what we're dealing with. We've dealt with Mambila, we've dealt with P&ID, and let's even know these arbitration cases that have been ruled against Nigeria. And let's see how we can start to quash all of them. Malami started that work after the P&ID case, before we saw the P&ID to a reasonable conclusion. So let's see what we can do as regards that. But Nigerians will always default. Nigerians will always have challenges like this. In the P&ID case, Eddie, we're exonerated because of corruption. But we'll always have things like this repeat itself because culture will always be strategy for breakfast. As it was in the 80s, so it is today. So what has changed?
All right, what has changed? Vimba, your take on the story.
Well, there's so many moving pieces in this story. I had to read so many different angles to try and really understand what could have transpired. Now, one thing that did stick out to me was that this Chinese firm was brought in by Ogun State under a certain governor, that's Benga Daniel. Now, that's when the deal was signed to develop a free trading zone. Now, what happened when he left? While he was in office, this company set up a Nigerian entity that was said to be appointed to manage that free trade zone. Now, when the governors changed, new governor came in and Governor Amosun assumed governancy of Ogun State. He is alleged to have tried to remove the appointed management company, which was the Nigerian entity of this Chinese firm, to install his own preferred company there. Those are the allegations by the Chinese firm. However, it went to arbitration and they won the award. Now, when they tried to enforce the 70 million award, they were granted the award, the arbitration award. Nigeria tried to appeal this in January of 2022, to which Judge Sarah Cockerhill of our High Court in the UK said the country had abused the time frame for appealing the arbitration award, so it had to be enforced. So Nigeria then went to the US. Now, at the US District Court for the District of Columbia also ruled that the arbitration is enforceable. Now, I'll just read this very quickly. It's in the majority judgment. The US Appellate Court held that the final arbitration award is enforceable under the New York Convention, since the dispute is between persons that shared a legal commercial relationship. So the court ruled that the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act arbitration exception stripped Nigeria of the sovereign immunity in the arbitration award case. And of course, once this ruling was delivered, just a few days later in France, is when these jets were seized through a court order by a French court. Now, we have lost this, Nigeria has lost this appeal in the US, in the UK, and in France. That's in 3 jurisdictions. So the explanation coming from the government that they are being blackmailed and that there's some sort of, some sort of, shall I say it, fraudulent production of evidence from the Chinese firm is a little bit confusing, because I wonder how powerful and how intelligent this Chinese firm is to be able to fool 3 different courts in 3 different jurisdictions. With regards to the jets being sovereign property, again, I've read the judgment based on the New York Convention. The Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, the FSIA, stripped Nigeria of the sovereign immunity. So it seems all is in order. However, let's resolve it. Why did we drag our feet from 2016, 2022? This has been in the courts for so long. They've been trying to enforce, the Chinese firm has been trying to enforce their award. They've been trying to get their money. But for some reason, we felt that even though we're in a breach of contract, we don't need to pay the fine. So there's a challenge there with regards to accountability and with regards to the respect for the rule of law.
All right. Thank you very much for breaking that down, Vimbai. Now, just to mention a few things clearly here. Number one is how contracts are entered into, especially by government or by administrations. Because we see, if you break it down, the bone of contention here is that one administration approved a contract and the subsequent administration, as it's we often see in Nigeria, did away with that contract without following due process or without considering the penalties for such an action. And then you wonder what happened with the Attorney General of the state's Attorney General, whether the governor received adequate legal advice before proceeding to cancel that contract, which put the state in breach, and now we find ourselves where we are today. Yesterday I said that government is a continuum, or is continuum. Therefore, a contract that was entered into by a previous administration should be honored, especially when you look at the terms of the contract. There may be many reasons why Governor Ibikunle Amosun decided not to honor that contract entered into by Governor Benga Daniel. However, the truth is that he ought to have looked at it and seen there was any way to remove themselves from that contract. And in the event where we then had a case with the firm, rather than allow it to linger for so long. Second is taking responsibility. So the first is how contracts are entered. The second is how contracts are honored beyond one term or one administration. And sometimes you know what happens where towards the end of a tenure, an administration enters into spurious contracts and just awards many contracts because they know they're leaving. So that also has to be investigated. Perhaps even looking at our system and strengthening our systems to ensure that, governors or leaders do not enter into contracts like this that will jeopardize either the next administration or the fate of Nigerians as we've seen it. In the words of Mr. Peter Obi, it is indeed an international embarrassment, and unfortunately it's not the first that's happened. Thank God that the P&ID case was now revealed to have been a fraud, to have been fraudulent, if not would have been in dire straits. But what this clearly shows to us is that despite all the ways that the Nigerian government is trying to now say they will appeal, they shouldn't have, as you've explained, the Chinese firm have gone through due process. They've obtained judgment in 3 jurisdictions. Let us now find a way to diplomatically solve it. Eat some humble pie and find a way to resolve this issue diplomatically. Just recently, I heard that the Chinese premier had invited President Bola Tinubu to China. So maybe that's one of the conversations they should have, especially because it's a Chinese company and this is, these are Nigerian property. So the route now is not to, be proud about this. Let's explore diplomatic options and let's try as much as possible to kill this international embarrassment. It also sends a signal to investors and other companies who want to do business with Nigeria. If this is how we do not honor contracts, if this is how we're able to break and then refuse to pay court or to abide or honor court judgment, it doesn't speak well, especially when investors are watching. So a number of lessons, and I'm hoping that this will be well managed as information, comes